Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're joined by the tall lady and a very special guest, Blue Orange 22. Today, we're going to talk about addressing the public as men's advocates and whom we want to have listen and what we can show them. Pull up a stump and join us. Great to be here. And welcome, Blue. It's good to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of you guys, so it's kind of an honor to be invited.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And tall lady, as always, a pleasure. Um,
Hello.
I
Pleasure to be here as always.
Today, as I mentioned, I would like for us to talk about something that has become very contentious, that, in my opinion, should not be contentious. Blue, you and I have had a lot of conversations kind of along these lines, and tall lady, I know how you how you feel about it in your youth and enthusiasm. But uh, my, I guess, my position on this is that the time has come, according to the general public, to try to figure out what the deal is with men and boys. And, frankly, that's been the approach, that we're suddenly this great and intractable mystery about what the heck is wrong with us. Now, from inside men's advocacy and, a lot of the well-ordered and civil manosphere, the answer is self-evident. We're degraded and dismissed, mocked, marginalized, resented, made to take the blame for and be accountable for events in the very distant past, that we have absolutely no tools, and we're quickly running out of ambition to try to fix. But now, like I said, the general public is like, hey, what's the matter? And Blue, I think you have some thoughts on how we can respond to that, and to whom, and also, and most importantly, how we go about it. What kind of an organization can we speak for, and what kind of a voice should we have? Should we be aggressive? Should we be in their face? Should we take the tactic of being hyper reasonable? There has to be a way to put the message out there in such a way, that the right set of people are going to listen. I have my own thoughts on who that group of people is, but I want to hear from everybody else. So, Blue, I think I'll turn it over to you. And what do you have to say?
Well, thanks, Les. So, first of all, the question I wouldn't use the word aggressive, but I do think we should be direct. And I do think we need to confront when people are spreading myths and misandry, the M&Ms, as I call them, when people misrepresent what men's issues are and misrepresent what men's rights activists believe and misrepresent what arguments men's rights activists are making and are doing so intentionally. We need to confront those people. And when you say hyper reasonable, I also agree with that as well. I think you should always stay reasonable, always stay professional, always stay calm, which is definitely difficult when you're talking to someone who is engaging in bad faith and is willing to lie, even if it hurts people. But when you watch two people talk and when you watch two people debate, the person that keeps their cool and the person that keeps their calm almost always looks like the person who's won the debate, because it looks like this is a person who is using reason over emotion. Now, I don't want to undervalue the value of using emotion either, because being emotional is a good part of being human. you should be getting emotional about any issue that's worthwhile talking about. If an issue doesn't have any emotional weight to it, then it's really not worth discussing, because it means people aren't really being affected by it. If it's not worth getting angry over or getting sad over, then why is it important? So I don't think there's anything wrong with being angry over injustice. On the contrary, the problem is people not being angry enough over injustice. But to actually get something done, to actually change the public perception, and to actually introduce men's issues and men's rights activists in a palatable manner to the general public, I do think you should stay reasonable and calm. That said, that doesn't mean passive. That doesn't mean you wait your turn to speak every single time. And because if someone is trying to ignore you or silence you or misrepresent you, they're never going to let you speak. So there is going to be that moment where you have to be assertive, and you have to step up to the podium, and you have to speak regardless, and you have to persist regardless, and you have to be direct, and you have to be assertive. And if someone is being bad faith and disingenuous, then you do have to confront them, and you do have to metaphorically get in their face, so to speak. But I always preach that when you are debating, you're not trying to convince your opponent of the debate. You're trying to convince the people watching you. And then I sometimes take it a step further. And when you are debating someone in good faith, when you are talking to someone who you think is being honest in their views, and they're not coming to the conversation with any bad faith or malicious intent, then don't even debate them. Converse with them. Have a conversation. Have a dialogue. And when it looks like you're earnestly trying to help people to understand your beliefs, and help people to understand where you're coming from, and help people to understand why you're saying what you're saying, what makes you say what you're saying, and then what are the facts and figures and experiences and anecdotes that you have to support what you're saying, that you do so in a manner that comes across as not trying to win the argument or not trying to win the debate, but is simply encouraging people to understand. You're not using these as quote unquote talking points. And there's nothing I hate more than the phrase talking points. I've always hated that phrase whenever I hear it. I also don't really like even the phrase good faith, bad faith, because I find that a lot of times the first person to introduce the term good faith or bad faith in a conversation is in fact themselves bad faith. So I almost am using words that I myself don't like using in conversations, but these are the terms that people most readily understand because they're the most readily used. But I always say this, to have a conversation first, because most of the people that you talk to that are anti-MRAs are honestly and genuinely anti-MRA. And what I mean by that is they are reasonable people who have a misunderstanding of the men's rights movement, and or misunderstanding of men's issues, and or misunderstanding of the dynamic of gender equality and the actual situation or the actual stats or the actual data on education, on unemployment, on whatever it is. And talking to these people can make a difference, especially as these people may have a very, very hostile view towards MRAs because they have read very, very anti-MRA hit pieces on somewhere like Vox, somewhere like Salon, somewhere like Vice, somewhere like Reddit. So they have a very negative perception of MRAs right off the bat. So simply being reasonable, while being assertive, while being sure of yourself and what you're saying, but being reasonable, can have an immediate effect. And that's something I've seen firsthand. People can kind of change. You see almost a surprised look in their face, or hear a surprised tone in the way that they're responding to you, because it's like, okay, what I was told about what these people are isn't jiving with what I'm experiencing. So when I look at people who make these bombastic and obnoxious YouTube videos, like feminist owns in the title, I don't think that is going to be effective in changing the long-term prospects for men's rights and the men's movement. I think it's a very good job at riling up a certain fan base, but if you want to be taken seriously, and if you want to make long-term, long-lasting, wide-spectrum changes, I think you have to balance hyper reasonable with, I won't use aggressive, I'll say direct and assertive. And that sweet spot, I think, is what we should be aiming for. But different situations call for different people. If you watched, Tall Lady and I were involved in a talk recently where we were talking about a very, very toxic person on TikTok. And this person was shown due respect, which was not necessarily respectful. If someone is blatantly dishonest and disrespectful and hateful, then you don't have to bend over backwards to be nice to that person. So a good balance between hyper reasonable and direct, I think, is good.
Thanks, Blue. Tall lady, we have any input?
I think I'm not saying blue isn't wrong, but I think the emphasis on it really depends on the situation should be put there because it really differs when it comes to men's advocacy. There's so many different facets and groups and parts to it, and each one of them has their own tactic you really have to take with it. Although the assertiveness does work generally, there is places where you need more assertiveness than others. Best put it, when bringing up the talk we had, we were criticizing a person who was obviously misinforming people on a very serious issue. And so for that, you get a little more aggressive, a little more assertive, and you can, of course, bring some emotional in there in your anger. But when you switch over to more administrative ways of going about your advocacy, you really need to tone down that emotion and sort of convert it into an energy of like inspiration to work harder. And also, it depends on the people you're working with as well. We're talking about the fact earlier within the chat that we had earlier today that we have all these YouTubers, all these TikTokers, all these social media people who are calling themselves men's rights activists that are somewhat causing their name to be slandered because they're so full of hate. People like Andrew Tate. And yet we see so many young folks that are gravitating towards them because that's what they're seeing. And as you always put it, Les, when society starts pushing men away and not offering them help, they're going to go to where they feel they see someone that they want to become or that they think is helping them, such as Andrew Tate. And so because of that, we see all these young men coming in who are so full of different kinds of emotions, who haven't been exactly taught how to deal with them, who decide that they are so full of anger that they are not the easiest to coach into learning how to debate in such a manner that they're more calm and collective. Because when you do debate someone, you want to be calm, collective, because it already puts you as a person of good faith, and it puts you in a position where you seem much more reasonable. And so for those kind of people, you really have to have a different way of going towards it because they are outraged and they are tired and they are done. And so, they're doing everything with such emotion. So when they see someone debating in a way that seems so stoic, they call that person sort of weak. They think that that person isn't emotional enough. And so when you're talking to them, you do have to show your anger a little bit more. You also need to show them how you're turning that anger into better debating skills. And your audience really varies as well, because then there's also the mental health field, which is a field we talk about quite often here. In the mental health field, you really need to be the most delicate because you never know what someone's really gone through. And so it becomes this process of you have to individualize your techniques. And then with the older folks, one of our issues is the fight between the older generation, the younger generation, and their beliefs of what's the right move for this movement. And so you've got to find a nice in between where you still respect certain old values, but you're trying to bring in the modern, which is something that frankly we've had some difficulty with at men's advocacy. Because although given all the respect in the world to these organizations that do exist, many of them are run currently by many older figures who have not yet taken the step into the modern day.
Yeah.
So
I am old, I am. Next month I'll be 62. But I could not agree more, that the leading figures of the organizations, even if they're younger than me, if I mention names like Not So Erudite or you know, a few others that are actually speaking for us, and they don't even know who we are, but they are saying what we ought to be saying. These people, that they deserve our respect, and they deserve our uh, regard, but they don't know, what the young folk are looking at, and they don't know what they're talking about. And I see that as a great danger, because there will come a time, frankly, not that long from now, when, guys like me just aren't going to be here. Right? Nobody lives forever. There's rules to this. But getting back to how to, well, I'll put it like this, addressing any one person or some small group of people about our issues, it's, as you say, tall lady, something that you have to sort of custom fit to the audience. You have to read the room, and not put yourself in the place of a immovable object, because
It's like how we learn in marketing about our target market. You have to base everything around and plan it around that target market.
Yep. And that's a rule for us, right? I mean, we are capable of screwing up, right? And to be honest, I think, all too often we have. Both of you were mentioning things like debate skills, and public forums talking about really contentious issues like this. My the thing I have seen be successful the most often when taking our position are those people, who basically just say, look, this is the way things are right now, and here is what is going to happen as a result of it, regardless of what anyone thinks or says. If we don't, shift some things around and take these matters more seriously. Now, Blue and I were talking before we started the podcast about consequentialism versus contention and a punitive approach. When I'm working with adults, I very seldom, even if they are totally unreasonable, I very seldom come at it like, well, here's what I'm going to do if you don't listen to me and do as I say. Here's the punishment that I'm going to enact. Right. What I say instead is, if you don't at least address this and take it seriously, the following things will happen all by themselves, and there won't be anything anyone can do about it. And the clock is ticking on how long we have to make that shift, because it won't last forever. That we've already seen so many situations where, we've damaged ourselves culturally and socially in ways that, frankly, we're probably not going to come back from. Those are permanent losses, right? That, maybe our distant descendants will be able to overcome, but in our lifetime, no. That's already gone, and it's not coming back. And oh well, but in order to prevent further damage, then first and foremost, in my opinion, let's sit down and talk seriously about the well-being of men and boys, because Lou, I think you mentioned, or tall lady, the retreat of way too many young men and even boys has been to places that nobody wants them to go, following people who do not have their interests or the common good at heart. Yeah, it's people like Andrew Tate and Sneeko and Fresh and Fit and Pearly and et cetera, et cetera. But the point is that I try to stress to people, this is what will happen. None of us here are supporting that or trying to help make it happen at all. It just happened, and just saying that, it's because of toxic masculinity and other, dismissive browbeating and scolding language makes that happen even more. Every time I watch a debate, or like say a contentious discussion, I can always hear the unreasoning and pretty obviously motivated speakers on both sides of these issues. They unfortunately, they never point out the very obvious consequences, right? They revert back to personal insults or some kind of like mythical this is our biology, or this is ordained by God. And I'm like, from our side, that's never going to get anybody anywhere. And from the other side, it's like I said, it's the same old threadbare rhetoric about toxic masculinity and patriarchal oppression, and like just an innate I don't know what you would even call it, an innate failing, like an inborn disability or condition of men and boys that they propose that we spend the rest of our lives punishing ourselves to overcome that, right? And your friend, I don't mind mentioning, Brent, the ex-patriarch, he's just a shining example of how that how their behavior solidifies the position of young men and boys in places, like I say, that we just don't want them to go. I don't want any young man having the idea that being, a personality like Sneeko or certainly Marvin from Fresh and Fit, is a way out of being punished for being male. Because it's never going to work. It just won't. Morals and ethics aside, some things work, some things don't. That doesn't. But as mentioning morals and ethics, the moral and ethical compass and framework of your average 17-year-old boy, is inconsistent at best, right? And that's not their fault. That is sort of innate, that it has to be developed, right? And it has to be, the young man has to be made comfortable and confident that being ethical and being moral and being, mentally and emotionally like put together is not only effective, but it will be good for him. It will make him happy, right? Now, that's a hard sell because, becoming introspective and self-aware and honest and compassionate and forgiving and mature is very hard work, and we already dump enough on young men and boys. We just overload them with stuff to do that really, frankly, isn't doing anybody any good anyway. But nobody is very often looking at the idea that, they probably have an inborn desire to become mature and to become reliable and to become versatile, and effective in the world that he's coming into. I often tell people that are not part of our movement and that, can't really see the problem with men and boys. I tell them, all of these youngsters, that you are so concerned about now, right? If you don't see them as human, and if you don't see them as flawed, but certainly, able to develop, if you can't do that, what's going to happen is they're going to get older, and they're going to become more ingrained in their current mindset and their current set of behaviors, right? And some of them will become more powerful. Some of them will become more aggressive, that's going to happen all by itself, and nothing in the men's rights movement is going to be able to prevent that and stop that from happening, unless we start getting some more cooperation and some more collaboration from our side of it. In previous conversations, we heard a lot about, what sort of mental health and emotional development type support can we provide to young men. And like I say, there's all kinds of ideas out there, right? And a lot of them, frankly, are very effective, right? But the problem is that they're expensive and they're time consuming. They require effort, not only the effort of the young man that's trying to change, a lot of effort, a lot of effort and a lot of expense and a lot of time, from everyone in that young man's community. Either A, they are willing, to pay those costs, or B, they are not. Neither one of them is free, right? But one of them will allow allow social order and peace, to stay in place, and the other will end in disaster. And that's just the way things are. Like I said, these are things that are a consequence. These are things that just happen, but at the end of the day, if we fail those young men, we won't be able to blame them because it'll be our fault. It will. I mean, in spaces that I frequent where, leftism and socialism, stuff like that is very common and very well thought of. I all I have to do is point out that, if you get what you want, right? If your movement becomes successful, then no matter what the problem is, it's going to be all your fault, okay? Because nobody else is going to have the power or influence or resources to do anything about it. It's like, are you ready for that? Because if you are, what that means is you'll have to have those virtues too. You'll have to be forgiving. You'll have to be forbearing. You'll have to be compassionate. You'll have to be honest. You'll have to be humble. You'll have to be wise. You'll have to be versatile. And it's like, whenever I say that, then I kind of get crickets, because at the end of the day, I say, if you do not have these things, the following will happen. Neither you nor anyone else will be able to stop it. And like I said, it doesn't take that much to prove it. Anyway, Blue, what do you think?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you say it's inevitable to get the reactions that you get from young men. And the rise of people like Andrew Tate and co. are in fact inevitable and did happen completely organically without any concerted effort from the men's rights movement. On the contrary, we would be against Andrew Tate and people like Andrew Tate, and yet they become so popular anyway. And so a question that I've posed several times to Andrew Tate's biggest critics and to feminists who blame misogyny for the rise of Andrew Tate is, well, why do you think these young men feel this way? Why do you think these young men are gravitating towards someone like Andrew Tate? And if you feel the answer is simply misogyny, take it a step further, because I don't think that's a sufficient answer at all. I don't think all of these 13, 14, 15-year-old boys, 25, 26, 27-year-old men hate women and hate girls out of the blue. And so therefore, they're just going to follow Andrew Tate. There's got to be a more sophisticated answer as to why people like Sneeko, why people like Andrew Tate get so popular so quickly. And I think this is where feminists have to look in the mirror and say, well, how do you treat these men? How do you treat these boys? What messaging do they get from you? What are you offering? If they were to go to your Twitter page or your Facebook page or your YouTube channel right now, and they were to look at the things that you post and the things that you say about men, would they be seeing, are they more likely to see supportive messages that would help them, or would they be more likely to see hashtag kill all men? Just statistically, try that. Go on Twitter. Go to any feminist Twitter feed and click through the profiles and see what you see more of. Do you see more misandry, or do you see more acknowledgement of genuine men's issues? Because I'll tell you right now, you'll see more misandry, and that's a very easy thing to prove. So to the people who criticize Andrew Tate, my response to you is, well, what alternative are you offering? If you look in the mirror, do you see Andrew Tate standing behind you? Because you claim that Andrew Tate is a product of hate. Whose hate? And hate stemming from what? So this is where, when I look at the men's rights movement and the things that we say and the things that we promote, it's so frustrating, because to whom are we trying to direct hate? Well, nobody really, unless if you want to say, we strongly dislike people who spread misinformation. We strongly dislike people who spread bigotry, but we certainly don't spread hate for people for being born a certain way. If you are a feminist who criticizes Andrew Tate, can you honestly say the same thing? I mean, if you watch this Velma show from Mindy Kaling, the entire pilot episode was chock-a-block of misandric, sexist, anti-male, racist humor, body shaming, quote unquote humor. And this is not a fringe radical. This is a mainstream voice. And it's one of dozens of examples that young men see every day. So to people that criticize Andrew Tate, and MRAs are among them who criticize Andrew Tate, but to simply write off Andrew Tate as misogyny is not enough, because what alternative are you offering?
Right.
So I think young men, and it's not just young men, it's men of all ages. Yeah, I can see why they're being pushed into this box of radicalization and why they are supporting Andrew Tate. But you have to look at why, who did that initial pushing? Because if Andrew Tate is the cancer, then feminism and misandry is the cigarette. Because what poisoned men in the first place? What toxicity did they breathe in the first place, and where did it come from? Because Andrew Tate didn't get popular on his own.
No. He made any ground he made in reaction to what young men and boys are facing. I was recently, again, to look at it from outside of, I was watching a discussion between everybody's favorite Anna Kasparian and Vosh about this issue. And, as expected, they were bewildered, right? Because they were stuck in the framework of, like I say, young men's, their belief that young men are just innately misogynistic and innately immature and innately patriarchal, but at the same time, even Anna, the person that she is, she said something is wrong here, that needs to be addressed. And, even Vosh, their conversation arose from a bunch of Twitters that he put out there, basically saying that the left collectively, pardon the expression, the left collectively routinely fails, to engage with young men when they are still in a place where they can be, collaborated with, and where they can still be invited. And it's true. Like I said, what we kind of focus down to feminism in particular, and it's very scolding, dismissive, condescending, browbeating approach to those same young men, that the left as a as a wider movement, has always been guilty of that. You know, I mean, whether it's on behalf of feminism or anything else, you know, and in that whole conversation I was watching, of course, you know, I never really saw them agree that, you know, they take the wrong approach. And the reason I think they really failed at it was that they never really, you know, looked at what is going to happen if they keep it up, right? And like I say, these are consequences. Whenever I'm in a group or in an environment, you know, where I'm the sole holder of our position, you know, in some group of people, right? I always talk about these things in terms of what will happen, you know, how this will all turn out. And I always put it in terms of, you know, what I call the rules. I mean, the things that just happen because nobody does anything to stop it, right? So these things will happen, you know, and I go to the past, you know, to history, and I say that because this is what happened before, right? You know, and by the time it's all over with, you know, they're a little closer to our side of the argument, you know, because they don't want bad things to happen any more than we do, you know. But I take myself and my own, you know, my own ideas and beliefs out of the picture, and I just say these things are real, you know, and they're inevitable. They're to part, you know, excuse the expression, they're part of what makes human nature human nature. So, you know, too many people, again, you know, like Andrew Tate and all of them, try to sell everybody that human nature is this biomechanical construct, you know, that everybody is chained to, right? And it's like, no, that's never been true, and it never will be. As long as we're just people, human nature is always going to be the impact on any individual person from the behavior of all of the people in that society. Whatever groupthink holds sway, right, is going to have an impact on how people behave, you know, and what they do. And the most volatile and frankly potentially dangerous group of individuals in that social order, it has always been and will always be young men and boys. You know, that's the rules, you know. And if the response to that is always going to be punishment and belittlement and resentment and bitterness aimed at them, they will always be a problem, you know. That's, like I said, there's no stopping it. There's no way out, you know. The only answer, you know, is to stop doing that and start doing something else.
Another issue too, though, is that not only do they need to start doing something else, they need a tactic. And I think this is where we need to start talking about responsibility on both sides, is we really need people speaking up on both sides. You know, one of the biggest problems with feminism is it believes to be a movement that really embodies everybody, and whether they want to or not, feminism just can't really do that. You can't have one group representing many other groups.
Yeah,
You
not
need those own people representing themselves. You know, I tried to advocate and help, but you know, when people come to me for help, I'll be honest, I'm a person, to be quite frank, with no penis and a very low level of testosterone. So there are many things I do not understand.
Right. It becomes, you know, an unreasonable challenge to, for example, put you in that position, you know. And another example of it, again, our good friend Brent, the expatriarch, you know, I watched a fair number of all of his TikToks. And here's the punchline, guys. He, at the end of the day, puts himself out there as a supporter of and an advocate for men. You know, I know, but you know, he's doing it from the perspective of someone, kind of the mirror opposite of yourself, that, he does have a penis and he does have testosterone, and he has these innate things, and yet, he seems to have convinced himself that, he can stand up and speak for you, that he can stand up and, make a case for the issues and, the miseries and suffering of women.
And he doesn't understand that.
No. And yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the initial impulse is to say, you don't know what you're talking about. You've never been one of us, right? Which is true. I mean, you would say that because it's a fact.
And that's the hard thing, is wokeism has become this thing about whoever is screaming thinks they have the right to talk about anything. Just to talk about personal experience, we were in this political server, and I was debating this guy on issues, and this guy had the actual audacity to sit here and ask me if I truly understand my own issues.
Yeah.
As a female who's also a minority.
Yeah.
In two ways.
And correspondingly, I've had women do the same with me. But of course, luckily for me, it was at a point in my life where I was kind of past even, getting angry or resentful about it. Yeah. So that I could just calmly say, I hope I do, because I'm, at the time I was like, I'm in my late 50s and I've been a man all my adult life. If I don't know now, I think I never will. Right. Yeah. At least, and I've really tried hard, but like,
and worst part is he thought he was allowed to talk about, because he's like, well, I've read some studies, I'm supposedly educated. I don't care how educated you think you are. If it is not happening to you, you don't really understand it. If you aren't there, I don't care how many articles you want to post about it. If you are not the person involved in the situation,
right,
you can't really speak about it. You can try to help those people out. You can advocate a little bit, talk about your experience and the stories that people have told you who do experience this stuff. You can't sit here and just go, maybe you don't understand your own issues, as if you do.
Yeah, it's like, I can understand any of my own like life, from my own experiences. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate into sociological research, even about just me, right? But the one thing I would never do is turn that around and tell you that because I have access to the sociology of womanhood, I know your life better than you do. For one thing, it's never been true. For another thing, I've created a danger for both of us, a danger for myself to look like a moron, and a danger for you in that, frankly, there's too many guys like that, where you don't know which one of us is going to try to do that with you. Like even where, Brent, he does have personal experience. He talked about, for example, the difference between manhood and masculinity, and he's fairly Marxist. So, he jumped on the bandwagon of saying, the alienation of men by industrialization tore away our manhood so that we had to replace it with projected masculinity. And when I heard him say that, this is a fellow male, right? I mean, he's a biological male Y chromosome holder, just like me, but I looked at that and said, you're not wrong, but your approach to this is incomplete to the point of being dangerous, right? Because it leads you into the places where you go where all you do is browbeat and scold and mock and dismiss. It's like it puts you in the last place you want to be if you really want to help men.
Yeah. And the issue is too is that nobody's really helping each other anymore because no one's giving the full story and no one's talking about the full story
Right.
because the full story is no longer, it's I mean, I guess it never has been, but even more so today, they will not put the full story ever because it's not profitable to do so.
Yeah.
And so we're always hearing this, and excuse my language, but basically half-assed story.
Yeah.
And we have to base off techniques and in our I guess paths in a way. I can't really think of the word at the moment, based on that half-assed story.
Yeah, it gets you 50% of the way. When I think about, to flip it around, when I think about people like Pearlie or Jedediah, sometimes even Brett from the Daily Wire, their position for their position about themselves and their fellow women. Again, it seems to be more drawn from a biology textbook than any experience of their own, and it's like, especially Pearlie, and I hate to keep dunking on her because end of the day, she's probably a good person, whatever, but she won't approach what all of this has been like for her personally, unless she's really pressed. And when she gets pressed, I mean, you can tell, as you say, it's really a half-assed response, you know. And so I tend not to believe it, and this guy, Brent, it's kind of the same thing, you know. He even in one of the comments on one of his TikToks, he did mention that he was a survivor of intimate partner violence in his own life, which says that he was the victim of intimate partner violence from a woman, and I'm like, again, the discussion is insufficient to the point of being dangerous, because this tells me, that I can't trust him to be open and honest and even-handed in what you're trying to say. Instead, you're being, personally insulting. You're being really, vague and in reference to quote studies that really look like they were heavily engineered in your favor, right? And it's like,
and a point that Miss Fanny Adams made too is the fact that he said them in the video, his studies, but then she would try to look around for studies he was supposedly citing and she couldn't find them.
mm-hmm. And like I said, I don't even deny that they exist. But my point is, this is, we're at a point now where trust is crucial, right? Anyone on any side of this that can't be trusted to be honest, is an enemy of all of us, right? Because they're in it for themselves. And at the end of the day, for a fact that they won't take any responsibility for the results. They never do,
Yeah.
I behave, and like even in this discussion, which as we know is public, anyone who wants to get on YouTube can hear us talking about this, and I try to talk about it in a way where, even if I'm successful and things change, I am able to, and I'm willing to take responsibility and account for the result, in my own little way. I won't say anything, that I can't answer for if it all goes to hell, right? These people are not doing that. And when I say these people, there's plenty to go around on every side of these issues. And it's like, I hate that, but that's what's selling right now. And that needs to change. I don't know, Blue, what do you think?
No, we've been talking a lot.
You with us, brother?
Yeah, sorry, the mic wasn't disengaging for some reason.
So your thoughts on the last 30 minutes or so of Taz and I?
No, I mean, I think you guys have pretty much summed it well. We're going to have to deconstruct where it begins and where it begins to foster in someone's minds. And then when you cross the line and you feel, okay, I've been subjected to enough where I now feel that it's justified to express a feeling that could be defined as, oh, that's misogynistic. Well, I define it as defending myself because I get the same kind of language directed at me. So all I'm doing is directing the same language back at you. And if you say that you are someone who represents social justice and equality, then surely me using the same language is simply doing the same thing. And so I think it's a feedback loop and it only gets worse because all it can do is amplify.
Yeah. And that amplification, like I said, it becomes a big gun. If you point it, if you point it in the wrong direction, right, then you do nothing but damage. Right? And like I said, that's why the ability to trust is so important. And again, I bring up the name Not So Erudite because she started on Twitch and she's been moving into YouTube. I've seen her on debate panels that are not her own channel. And, she's out there fighting for us in a very honest and very forthright way, even though she is a woman. But the one thing she does not do is try to speak about us, and speak for us out of our own experience. She leaves that to us, right? And so far, we haven't really picked that up. But she's in these debate panels, and they break them up so that there's like two or three people on one side of an argument, two or three people on another side of an argument, and her side of it is generally our side, and she speaks very eloquently, and very completely and very honestly on our behalf. And like I said, except for a few kind of minor mentions, she doesn't really even know we exist as such, um, and, like I said, that needs to change. We need to recognize the people that are doing the right thing by us, even if they don't know us. And I think we have to do a much better job also of making sure people understand that's not everybody who's speaking for us. Some of the people speaking for us are doing us more harm than any feminist I ever met, and
It's sort of like we have to introduce them to a list of this is who's like really making change, who's the real person speaking, the real person who's actually focused on solving things, and here's the people who are fake and just looking for internet fame or whatever else and aren't actually, there in the faith of helping you. They're
Right.
not good people to be a role model. They're not good people for you to follow. If you follow them, you are falling into a pit.
Yeah, I mean, even the ones that are more minor, and they don't appear to be doing it for money or clicks or whatever, they're just out there doing it. They are speaking for us, let's say this is a kind of a limitation of the conversation, is that they're not very good at it. I mean, they try and they seem to be, like genuine. I'm thinking of a lot of men's, women who speak for men on places like TikTok and Twitter, and they are trying, but they kind of operate in a vacuum, right? They just know that they feel really bad, and things ain't the way they ought to be, and they're not happy. I don't blame them, but the point is that if, for example, they revert back to, like I say, the evolutionary biology of it, and the God ordained gender construct, and just say this is the way things must be, then I can't get mad at them, and I can't like raise hell about it, but at the same time, I know if if those things were ever really, driving relationships and driving human behavior, that time is over. If that is painful, then mourn it, feel bad, be sad, but understand that it's not coming back. And we're still here, and there are still things to do. Just raising hell about the fact that like on TikTok, they're like, men aren't men anymore. I said, well, okay, what are we? Uh, and men ought to be this and men ought to be that. And it's like, there might have been a time when that was true, but that time is, we being clever humans, we've engineered our way out of that. Right. And our choices are to either, allow ourselves to just become primitive, right, with really short lifespans, lots of famines, lots of disease, lots of civil war, and invasions and stuff like that, or we could figure out something else. Because
and when they say men aren't men anymore, what they mean by what a man should be is what they want a man to be. What is best for them for a man to be.
Right, and that's
it
the
never
first
actually
mistake.
It's always, well, this is what would be preferable and ideal for me in a male partner. Therefore, this is what men should be. But I'm not getting that. So therefore, men aren't men anymore.
Right.
Again, maybe you should look in the mirror. Maybe there's a reason why men are not being this way, not just in general, but maybe there's a reason why men aren't being that way towards you. Maybe these men that you say aren't men anymore might be that kind of man if they met a woman who was supportive of him as a man, as you think he should be. So the question is, you're saying that men aren't men anymore because they're not acting or saying the things that you want them to say, and they're not behaving the way that you want them to behave. But
Well, men aren't
your end
behaving
of the
that way
bargain?
as well, though, because it's so contradictory. They can't make up their mind how they want men to behave.
Yeah.
Sorry, if that
No,
doesn't-
that's I mean, that's
They
self-evident.
changed the social structure and
Yeah.
the expectations, and now they're going.
Yeah.
So men aren't acting the way we want them to, but also
Right.
if they act that way, we're mad at them too.
Right. And it is still based on, what their own expectations are. And in defense of them, I guess I understand, and I guess I sympathize with the impulse to, somehow turn back the clock, but at the same time, leave out all the negativity. But when I watch or when I, take in media where men, especially men in my age group, are responding to that, what they're not like raging and screaming and squawking. They're just saying, yeah, we're done. Thanks. Have a good day. What we want now is peace. We have failed you apparently, in giving you what you think you want from us. And we're okay with that, that we don't take that failure as a loss. We're just going to go cash in our chips.
And when men do that, they're called incels or MGTOW and etc. But when the women we were talking about just 5 minutes ago saying that they were giving up on men because men aren't men anymore, again, the impetus is on men.
Yeah.
Men are blamed in both scenarios. When men say they're done with dating, it's men's fault. When women say they're done with dating, it's still men's fault. It's again a complete lack of reflection and self-reflection.
Right. Right. And out of my own experience, here since I've honestly started to get better and heal up, right? On the one hand, I have I have these really almost, idealistic, loving, caring, compassionate, and good-natured relationships with all these women, which is really nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. What I don't do, is sleep with them, right? Any of them. And it's like, that part of the conversation never comes up, right? Because I don't need to, I'm old for one thing. For another thing, I got issues. I'm not going to lie, but the other part of it is that I can't be used as the model. Nobody like me can be used as the model, right? It's not wise, right? Because we're talking about, like blue fellas in your age cohort. What if I told you that you could experience all these really rich and fulfilling and supportive relationships, not with just one woman, but with a dozen, but I also told you, look, the most intimacy you're going to get is going to be platonic, right? It's like, I can't ask you to do that, and neither should they, right? But if it's going to be that kind of, connection with another person, in your case of the opposite sex, if it's only about what they want and what they need, no matter how good of a man you are, it will fail. It will fall apart, and everyone will be sorry that they ever got involved, right? Again, there's rules. This isn't something that will, this isn't something that you'll either do or not do because you're a bad guy, and it's not something that they will either do or not do because they're bad women. Just, this is how stuff works, and there is no escape, right? If it can't be about you as much as it is about her, there is no hope. I think even a guy like Brent, if he would just sit down and have a glass of water and calm down a little bit, even he would have to agree with that. And I'm willing to bet that he apparently is in some kind of relationship, and he's even alluded to this in other TikToks, that, he admits he and his partner check in with each other, right? On a routine basis. And it's like, if he only checks in with her, he's going to run out of gas. If she doesn't reciprocate, he won't be able to keep it up. Nobody can. Superman couldn't do that. That's, like I said, that's just the way it goes. It's too bad, but I mean, I would like a world where, the
Well, Superman also was supposed to be strong, stoic, and just not emotional. It's how they showed him for a very long time.
Yep. Like I said, even he, ended up having to be cared about, and supported, and seen as vulnerable and not rejected. I said, this is, there's no escape from that. It's it's almost a tyranny of human nature that both men and women have to be cared about, and they have to be forgiven, and they have to be seen as human. Otherwise, everyone suffers. And like I said, that's, these are the rules. Don't blame me. I just work here. But
Yeah, and when you point out about checking in on each other in a relationship, if you are operating under the feminist under the feminist concept that men are inherently privileged, and that men's issues can only be addressed from a feminist perspective, how well can a man really be checked? How well can you really check on a man and the things that he's going through if you are refusing to recognize or are unable to recognize the foundation in which male issues are based upon, which is cultural misandry? If you don't accept that misandry exists, then how do you properly check on men's issues? What are you checking, and what are you checking it with?
Right. Yeah, it's ironic. Once I was asked by one of my caregivers, if I were to put my spurs back on and get back in the game, what kind of woman would I be looking for? And, what would be the qualifications? And it's like, well, first thing I said was, well, what do you think they ought to be? And really just the kinds of things I mentioned, was what she said, is it ought to be someone who is, able to stand with me when I'm really at my worst, right? And when I'm really weak and when I'm really just totally down, and still be able, be able to love me, but also still be able to respect me, and still see me as a man. Now, that kind of woman really doesn't grow on trees, right? They don't. I told that to her. I said, I think you are that kind of woman. I know a few others, right? But my point is, you are much more rare than you think you are. And when I say that to you, I'm not giving you a compliment. I'm presenting you with a dilemma, because I cannot fix that. No man will ever be able to fix that. That's going to be up to you all. And you will either succeed or fail, but understand there's a lot at stake. And I said, in addition to those things, for me, because my position, frankly, is political, right? Okay, this woman, this hypothetical woman, would have to do a minimum of 1 year of membership in a men's advocacy organization, and I would need to be able to verify that independently, right? I would need to see both online and real life activism on our behalf, right? I would, she would need to understand that, if she gets me as is, no warranty, that I may not be able to develop any further than I already have, and when push comes to shove, that will be absolute, but then I asked that same person, I said, the way things are right now, I can't ask that of any of you, I can't, because you're not, collectively, you're not capable. You can't yet do it. The reason you can't right now is because you're not trying. And I said, unless and until this hypothetical woman shows up, and by the way, rock bottom, 50 years old or older, I think young women are great and whatever have you, but I'm old, I'm old, right? And like I said, I'm not connected in that way with anybody below a certain age. So I said, this is, that prices everybody out of the market, right? And I'm no prize myself. So, it's like when people, especially women, kind of like, cajole me and press me about staying single. I'm like, here's why. And I said, this isn't just for my benefit. This is for the common good. This is because I would be irresponsible and unwise not to have these qualifications. It would make me a liar, right? It would make that person connected to somebody who's not really me, right? I mean, I could lie to him and say, come on, let's go, but it would be a lie and everyone would regret it. And more to the point, I might not survive it. I ain't a kid no more. I'm old. So I can say, yeah, I mean, it can be done, but the stakes are very high. Anyway, any closing thoughts?
Well, first of all, I mean, if you're almost 62, I don't think you're old. I think you're middle-aged, first of all.
That's what my doctor keeps telling me. He's like, 61 is the new 41.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, old doesn't start until 70, and some people honestly 75. And even then, that's the lower range of old. True old starts at 80.
You trying to tell me I got to do this for another 20 years?
You get to do this for another.
I'd like to remind you, my father's soon going to be 70 and he's still here.
Okay. If you insist. But yeah, go ahead, you guys.
You got it, Taz. You'll make it. No, 20 years. No problem.
we will see. Like I say, any other closing thoughts?
It's just frustrating knowing that we're right 20 years before everyone else. And I know that sounds arrogant and presumptuous, but I've been an MRA for over 10 years now. And so far, every time I make a prediction 5, 10 years out, that's how the trends align. And that's what ends up happening. And we can see this happen in slow motion. And it's when people are surprised, when I see a thread on Reddit where people are surprised that so and so feminist organization or figure emerges as being problematic and misandristic and sexist, like the shock and the surprise. It's like they don't understand when we see it coming years ago. And what's happening now, we've been talking about it for years and we've been shamed for it for years. And 5, 10 years from now, everyone's going to realize that we were right. What's frustrating is that we're probably never going to get the credit.
Yeah, I'm at a loss of a closing statement, honestly. It's just, we do so much in our advocacy, but we can only do so much. And I know it's hard for people to join because they get fearful and the stakes can be a bit high, but also if they don't, the cycle that's already happening is going to continue and we're just going to fall. You already see it just falling down on itself. And it's just rough. It really is just rough.
Yeah.
Gotta hope that some people wake up, sort of just want to take two pans and tell the world to wake up, banging the pan.
Yeah. Yeah. And still try to do it in such a way, that assures people that, this ain't just about us, right? It's not just, it is concerned with, the condition of men and boys, but like everybody is involved, everybody, and everyone will suffer. Everyone, will struggle and hurt, even if they get on board, right? It's going to be hard, but if they don't, it's going to be hard and then it will fail, right? It'll just be, a long, rough trip to a better place or a long, rough trip over a cliff. Like I said, I don't like those choices. It sucks, but this is where we are.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank both of you so much for joining me. And thank you everybody for listening. Really appreciate it. And we will see you again next time. Everybody.
Well, let me just,
sure.
I should be the one thanking you for inviting me on. I had a wonderful time, I have to say, and I really do enjoy this channel. I recommend everyone check it out, and thank you.
You bet. Yeah, I mean, I'll hit you up every time we do this. If you can join, that'll be great. Always welcome. Always welcome. And Tall Lady, once again, thank you so much.
Always glad to be here.
Appreciate it. Hopefully, Dead Duck will be joining us again next time. Everybody take care and thanks again.